Hey y'all, it's Heel Heat time.
Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles and this is another episode of It Came From the Network. Now on this one, we did a little bit of a different thing. We went on our Facebook page, we asked for your suggestions, and I selected from one of them. So this one comes out from our friend Dave Byrne. It's King of the Ring, 1995. We're going to jump right into it. And just to let you know, on It Came From the Network, we review the weird, the wild, the campy, and sometimes just downright bad stuff that you could find on the WWE Network. Hence the name of the title, It Came From the Network. Anyway, jumping right into WWF, King of the Ring 1995. The first match, which was actually on the preview show on the original airing, we have the last of the qualifying matches, Savio Vega versus IRS. A decent match. Savio Vega had just debuted, I think maybe a month or two before the pay-per-view. Picks up the win here. Goes on to be involved in the rest of the King of the Ring tournament. It was okay. I mean, it was what it was. I believe it was about 6-7 minutes, so just an alright match. Next up, going to the first match of the pay-per-view. And you're going to notice a trend here. There's 9 matches on the show, and one of these people is in 4 of them. Savio Vega versus Yokozuna. Now, here's one that was kind of interesting, especially if you base it in the time frame that you're watching. You have Savio Vega, who's the guy that they're bringing in and they're going to try and build as a star. And you have Yokozuna, who's an established star already, who's been a champion already at this point. Which way do they go? How do they keep Yokozuna looking strong? How do they keep Savio Vega looking strong? Well, they do it. They add a little bit of outside information. If you remember, Savio Vega was brought in as a friend of Razor Ramon, and Owen Hart at the time was the tag team partner of Yokozuna. So we get a little bit of those outside information, outside interference from those two. You get a little bit of wrestling on the outside. Everything gets a little bit confused. Savio realizes that they're being counted out, rolls in the ring before the 10 count, wins the match. Not a terrible match, especially with the constraints they had and the way it went down. I thought the two guys involved really worked with what they had. Like I said, you have to keep Yokozuna strong, and you have to make Savio Vega look strong. At this point, he's still being built to the fans. So, the way they did it, what happened, I thought it worked well, personally. Next up, we have the Roadie versus Bob Holly. Now, both these names should sound a little bit familiar to you if you're not familiar with this incarnation of them. The Roadie would go on to be the Road Dogg, Jesse James, part of the New Age Outlaws, and Bob Holly would go on to become Hardcore Holly. This was still when he was in his NASCAR racing driving period, where he was Bob Sparkplug Holly. And the Road Dogg, Roadie, was Jeff Jarrett's Roadie when they were doing the Jeff Jarrett Be My Baby Tonight, I'm a Country Stander thing. This match, you could tell there was something there with the Roadie, that he had some of that it factor. Bob Holly hadn't quite found it yet, and the Roadie, his in-ring skills, which never amounted to be a great in-ring wrestler, he was always more of an entertainer, which I'm not knocking at all. There's a lot of very entertaining wrestlers, and he is definitely one from the period. He's definitely one of the guys that stood out in the Attitude Era. But at this point, he hadn't quite gotten down the ring psychology and how to work a match and make it interesting. He danced around a lot, but it really didn't work in the spots he danced, and it didn't really help out the match. Bob Holly at the time hadn't really broke out and showed what he could do. It wasn't until he became Hardcore Holly where his personality really clicked. And this is kind of one of those matches that are probably going to be forgotten about in the annals of time, and probably rightfully so. Brody picks up the win. We move on to the next match in the tournament. We have Kama, the Supreme Fighting Machine, who was formerly Papa Shango and in the future would become Kama Mustafa, aka the Godfather, aka the Good Father, versus Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid. This is probably the best match on the show. Kama or Godfather, whatever you would call him, with all his detractors, he actually could tell an interesting story in his matches, and this was one of them. He was against Shawn Michaels, arguably one of the best wrestlers that's ever laced up his boots. They put on a good match. It went to a 15-minute time limit draw, leading the way to the one side of the card going straight to the finals. I thought it was a good match. I thought it was fun. I thought we seen some of what made Shawn Michaels a star. We seen some of what made Kama special. And this again was, he was part of the $1 Million Corporation. He was in a feud with The Undertaker at the point. And they were kind of building him as a new monster heel. I believe, if I remember correctly, the Supreme Fighting Machine was a takeoff on a very new concept at the time in 1995 of mixed martial arts. Pride had just started up in Japan. UFC, I believe, only ran 1 or 2 shows, maybe a couple more by 95. Pancrase or Pancration in Japan had started in the early 90s, so we're really at the onset of mixed martial arts, and it's starting to get a little bit of a buzz with guys like Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie. And this was kind of one of the first times wrestling started to bring UFC aspects in with Kama. That's how I took it as with the Supreme Fighting Machine thing, and that his style was very similar to a mixed martial arts practitioner of the time. But all in all, I think this was my favorite match on the show. It was fun. Again, it showed off Shawn Michaels, and it showed off Kama Mustafa. Or Kama, as he was at the time. Next up, we have Mabel versus The Undertaker. This was a slow, methodical, boring, plodding match. And we know we have one of the great wrestlers of all time in The Undertaker in the match. And we have a guy who's done better in Mabel. I'm not a guy that hates on Mabel. He just didn't have that top level heel quality that they wanted him to. And this is proof of it. You put him in there with a guy like The Undertaker, he should be looking like a star just being in there with a star of that magnitude, but he really didn't, and it really made a disappointing and boring match. Mabel picks up the win when Kama comes in behind the referee's back and clocks The Undertaker. It just, I don't know. To me, this was the dud of the night. Probably the worst match. And like I said, I don't want to knock either guy. I think they both have been better. I think they've had better matches with each other, even. But this one just was a stinker. Next up, continuing on with the tournament, the third match of the night for Savio Vega versus the Roadie. Interestingly enough, they did an interview in the backstage before the match where the Roadie started referring to himself as the Road Dogg, and so did Jeff Jarrett. I don't honestly remember, going back, if this was the break when they started calling him Road Dogg, or it was until after he split with Jeff Jarrett that he became Road Dogg full-time and not the Roadie. But I believe this was the first time he was mentioned as such. So it's a little bit of an interesting thing to see. Again, not a great match. Savio Vega, for all they wanted him to be, he really just didn't have that connection with the United States fans that he had with the Puerto Rican fans. Which he was. He was a huge star in Puerto Rico. He was a main event guy. And you could tell by the way they structured this, they made this King of the Ring to make him a star. And it's a great idea. It's something that we clamor for today when people say, hey, we need to make Cesaro a star, we need to make this guy a star, we need to make that guy a star. You look for something like this where they have those breakout performances. Savio Vega, in all intents and purposes, was given the opportunity to break out and become a star off of this pay-per-view, and kind of showed his limitations, unfortunately. Vega picks up the win over the Brody after we had some interference with Jeff Jarrett and Razor Ramon. It was a decent match, nothing to write home about. But, you know, it's just what it is at that point. Next up, we have the match that pretty much they were banking on the pay-per-view, or what was selling it. Bret the Hitman Hart versus Jerry the King Lawler in a Kiss My Foot match. This was a culmination of pretty much a year-long feud between the two. I think it might have even been longer than a year once it got over. And the two had fantastic matches all the way through. We got two of the great wrestlers in the history of the sport. And I know I keep saying that about different guys, but if you really look at it, you got guys on this card like The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Jerry the King Lawler. I mean, some of the guys that are going to go down in history in the top 10, 20 wrestlers of all time. And it kind of falls flat. This match, I think the gimmick was stupid. I think it was silly. Even 20 years ago, I would have been 18 at the time that this match happened. And I don't know if it was the fact that I was an 18-year-old and the Kiss My Foot type matches, the Crybaby type matches, just weren't doing it for me, or if in general the entire wrestling world had passed it on. Because by 95, and it's evidenced in the crowd chants, which we'll get to in a little bit, we've seen ECW starting to surge to the forefront, starting to change the style, starting to make an impact on what would become wrestling over the next 10, 15, 20 years, to where it's changed so much now that it's almost a different sport than it was in 95. Some of this stuff is still there, but we don't have the plotting big guy. We don't have the overly gimmick matches. We got gimmick matches. I mean, we got TLCs, we have Hell in the Cells, Elimination Chambers, but we don't have silly stuff like Kiss My Foot or tuxedo matches or silly stuff like that. Just, I don't know, it was overly gimmicked. At the end, we see Hakushi come in, try to help Jerry Lawler win. Backfires, Bret Hart picks up the win, makes Jerry Lawler kiss his foot, and then makes Jerry Lawler kiss his own foot, which the story going in, we seen in the vignettes leading up, Jerry Lawler wasn't washing his one foot for a month. They purposely put a beat-up looking sock on his foot to make it seem like it smelled worse than it was. And again, just silly, cartoony. This led to Isaac Yankem coming in and helping with the feud, which Isaac Yankem would go on to become Kane. Just, I don't know, to me it just didn't work. And it just was a silly match with a silly concept. And next up, going back to the tournament, we have the finals. Savio Vega wrestling for the fourth time versus Mabel for the King of the Ring. This was okay. It wasn't as bad as Mabel versus Undertaker. Again, Savio Vega is a good worker. Problem, he just didn't connect with the crowd. And this is where I just mentioned it a second ago. The match was kind of boring and a little bit methodical. And the crowd, it's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. the epicenter of ECW, and the ECW explosion and impact is starting to be felt, we hear the crowd about halfway through the match starts chanting ECW. Because they realize we're not getting what we want to see on this show. We're not seeing what could have been some great matches. Bret Hart versus Jerry Lawler should have, in all intents and purposes, been a great match. Owen Hart was there. He could have wrestled somewhere. He's a great wrestler. Yokozuna was still a solid wrestler at this time. Savio Vega was good. Maybe should have been highlighted. Razor Ramon, even though they were doing an injury angle, maybe he could have fit on the card somewhere. Jeff Jarrett, another guy that was there but not used in the card. Hakushi. I mean, you had these extra talents there that could have been used in different ways but weren't, and it led to a more boring show. And I understand what they tried to do. Like I said, I really believe that this show was set up to break out Savio Vega. And it did, unfortunately. We see Mabel pick up the win. Afterwards, Mabel and Mo start attacking Savio and then attack Razor Ramon, which brings out the 1-2-3 Kid. Again, another guy that maybe put in a different spot or maybe put in a match would have gave us a more exciting match, kept the crowd interested. But at this point, Mabel wins, picks up King of the Ring, probably the most disappointing King that they've had. Definitely up until that point, the two before on pay-per-view wise were Owen Hart and Bret Hart, so by the time we get to Razor Ramon, or I'm sorry, to Mabel, it was a little bit disappointing. The next year it would be Stone Cold Steve Austin, so as you can see, one of these things is not like the other. And it's Mabel, unfortunately. Who, again, I'm not trying to bury Mabel. He just didn't fit the role they gave him. He fit better as a tag team wrestler. He fit better as a monster in a stable like he was later on as Viscera. But he didn't fit as a top-level main heel in the Federation. Just my opinion. Last but not least, we have the main event of the night. An odd main event. Sid, Psycho Sid, and Tatanka from the $1 Million Corporation versus Bam Bam Bigelow and the WWF champion Diesel. Another thing why I think the crowd turned on this match, and also kind of an odd decision considering at the time King of the Ring was one of the main pay-per-views. This, if you notice, it wasn't in your house. They had King of the Ring, Survivor Series, Royal Rumble, obviously WrestleMania, and SummerSlam were the 5 main pay-per-views, and then everything else was an in-your-house pay-per-view. They should have really used, they could have used a World Championship match on here. I would have been okay with Tatanka versus Diesel, Sid versus Diesel. That way you could put Tatanka or Bigelow or Sid or Tatanka, any one of those three that you don't use in this match, could have been put into the King of the Ring tournament and gave it more power. Imagine instead of where Bob Holly was, you had Tatanka. Or instead of where Sid was, or I'm sorry, instead of where the Brody was, you had Sid. Or instead of, I don't know, instead of Mabel, Bam Bam Bigelow was the guy that won the King of the Ring. Just saying, it kind of felt like they didn't know what to do with this roster, and they were trying to work in some new talent and make them stars, but they chose the wrong talent. This match was very, I want to say, kind of silly, kind of boring. It felt like a main event of Monday Night Raw more so than it did a pay-per-view main event. It didn't really advance anything. Bigelow and Diesel pick up the win when Sid walks away. And it just, to me, was just silly, and to me it was a useless match. On a ho-hum card up to the point, I mean, we have 9 matches, and out of the 9 matches, I only recommend watching one, and that is Kama versus Shawn Michaels. And I very reluctantly recommend watching that. If I were to say, give that match out of 5 stars, it's probably a 3-star match. It's not a great match, but it sticks out in a night full of stinkers. The night was overran, the crowd became restless, they chose the wrong guy, Savio Vega, who did not connect to go forward. They chose the wrong guy to win the King of the Ring in Mabel, who couldn't carry being a top-level heel. It just... To me, it was a really badly, really poorly booked pay-per-view, and really bad idea. I mean, you could have had Owen Hart double King of the Ring. You could have had Jeff Jarrett win King of the Ring as the Intercontinental Champion. You could have had Shawn Michaels, who was the obvious choice going into it. He was red hot. Bam Bam Bigelow, Razor Ramon, 1-2-3 Kid, Hakushi. All these guys, I think, would have been better served to be King of the Ring than Mabel was. But I understand what they tried to do. It just fell flat on its face. Now, coming off of that, we're going to go right into our ratings. Now, if you've seen the show before, or even if you haven't, we have a 1 to 5 scale. 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. 1 is a gobbledygooker, 2 is a renegade, 3 is a Hurricane Helms, 4 is a Goldust, and 5 is a Kane. I'm going to give this show a 2, a renegade. It's not the worst pay-per-view I've ever seen. It's probably in the top 10 of worst pay-per-views I've ever seen. If not for the Kama versus HBK match, it would probably be a 1. Just a listless and boring, a lot of wrong decisions made, and just didn't do it for me. Basically, that's all I have to say about the pay-per-view. I do want to mention again, thank you to Dave Byrne for selecting this. I know I talked bad and I didn't like it, but I do enjoy watching these. I actually get joy out of watching bad pay-per-views as well, so don't feel bad about showing me something that was unenjoyable. Like I said, I put my brain in the thought processes at the time, and I understood what they were going for, just the execution was poor. Thank you again for everybody that commented on the Facebook post, and if you are watching this, make sure to go to Facebook, give us a like there, go follow us on Twitter, like this video, share this video, do what you can to spread the word so we can, so we'll keep making these videos if you enjoy them, or if you don't, let me know what you don't like. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. I don't know until you tell me. But anyway, overall, the show was a 2, a renegade. Thanks to Dave Byrne for selecting it. Also, I want to give another shout out before I go off the air here. As you see this wonderful shirt I have for the George South Wrestling School, which is in North Carolina, I'd highly recommend it. All the guys and girls that are coming out of the school are becoming some of the best wrestlers on the indie scene, and not long from now are going to be the best wrestlers in the WWE. Check out the George South Wrestling School if you're wanting to become a professional wrestler. Shout out to you, George. And also, shout out to my great friend, the lovely Laura Lyons, for sending me this. This is one of my Christmas presents from her. I definitely appreciate that. Thank you, my friend. And thank you again, Dave, for selecting this. And thank all of you for watching. My name has been George Coles, and this has been another episode of It Came From the Network.